Hi, I'm Frank and welcome to my Woodturning YouTube channel. This week I'm going to unwrap this cedar burl that I turned in part 1 video, and I will put a link at the very end here so you can get back to part 1. But in that video, part 1, I turned the wet burl, rough turned it, and then put it in this just paper bag to sit for 2 or 3 months. And with it being cedar, it dried quite quickly, so I think it's dry enough now. There we go, there's the rough turned burl. You know, it's maybe 1.5 inches thick, something like that, and it's worked a little bit, but there's no major cracks. Looks pretty good. So in this part 2 of the video, I'm just going to finish turn this. I am just going to use the small moisture meter just to make sure that it actually is dry. Yeah, that's looking like 7 or 8%. That's pretty darn good on the inside. I'm just going to try the outside and see if I get a reading. Same thing, sort of 7 or 8%. So that's good. One of the first things I have to do, because this piece is now warped and out of round, I'm just going to use this jam chuck and bring the piece up here, and then I will true up the tenon and true up the entire bottom or outside side of the piece. With this being cedar, a really soft wood, I really need to make sure my tools are good and sharp, especially for my final cuts. So here I'm just sharpening up one of the bowl gouges before I start turning. And I'm moving to the secondary wheel just to put a secondary bevel on the piece. And there's what the profile looks like. I'm just going to first true up the tenon with a bowl gouge, and then I will use a small skew to just create a dovetail profile, because that's what I need for my my particular chuck that I'm going to use. And now I can just start working on the outside surface. And all I'm doing is really just taking the high spots off, because I already have the general shape that I'm looking for. The important thing here is just to get a really clean cut, because I don't want to do any scraping on this cedar. If I use a scraper, it'll create tear out for sure. I'm switching to this blunter 60-degree angle bowl gouge just to get in this little curved area. It's kind of a tricky area to get your tool into and make a nice sweep and get a good clean cut around there. The next series of clips, you'll see that I'm spending quite a lot of time in this area just to get it perfect. You might hear a bit of background noise. Yeah, it's a really hot day and I've got the fan running. So unfortunately with the sound you'll hear a little bit of background fluttering type noise. That surface doesn't look too bad now. What I'm going to try to do now is just use a regular bowl gouge and come in the other way. It's probably opposite to the way it should be cutting, but we'll see what happens here. Well, it left a pretty rough surface. So I'll just try a little bit more with the other tool and just keep working my way in. This looks pretty good now, but I still can't really get this very final surface, so I'm going to try going in with this other tool again, going the opposite direction of cut. Well, that was pretty good. I mean, the surface is quite rough, but I got all the major ridges off. So now what I'm going to do is just use a pull cut and try riding the bevel using a pull cut and just to get a little bit better surface. And there, that's not too bad. I can just sand that out now. With the bottom of the piece now totally cut, I'm going to change chucks around and turn it around and then work on the inside surface. If you're enjoying the video, please hit the like button and subscribe to my channel. Normally I would bring the tailstock up for additional support, but I've got a big tenon, and this piece of Burl being cedar, it's very light, so I'm going to turn it without the tailstock in place, and you can see this really nice swing away feature the robust lathe has. Makes it really easy to do bowl turning. And I'm just going to work small areas at a time, getting a final finish for the first 2 or 3 inches, and then work down to the next 2 or 3 inches, and get a good surface, and continue on. It's always good to check your wall thickness just to make sure you've got an even thickness throughout the piece. I've switched gouges to one that's sharpened at a 45-degree angle. I just find this gives a cleaner cut on the side walls. So you'll see me switching back and forth to my regular 55-degree gouge for roughing, and then to my 45-degree gouge for finish cuts on the first part of this. Another final cut in here, and this is about as far as I can go with this 45-degree angled gouge. There it is there. Now for the bottom part, I'm going to use a 60-degree more traditional grind, which is basically called a bottoming bowl gouge, and I find that gives a cleaner surface on the bottom of all my bowls and my burls. Now for some stationary power sanding. And this outer wing, it slanted back a little bit, so I wasn't able to actually cut it. So I'm just going to sand it. Start with 80 grit on these spots. The rest of it, I'll sand from 120 down to about 320 grit. I'm going to use the jam chuck again. This is what I started with, and this is what I'm going to end with. So this allows me to take the tenon off and get the bottom all finished up. After cutting a concave surface on the bottom, I will fully sand it, and then just cut off the rest of this little nub with this thin kerf pull saw. To take the rest of the nub off the bottom, I'm going to use this Fordham type tool, which is basically like a Dremel, and I'm just using a Cuts-All burr. It's just a carbide burr with a whole bunch of little sharp bits on it. I'm going to finish this burl with general salad bowl finish, and anytime I have bark on a piece, I always brush the bark first with the salad bowl finish, just using a little throwaway brush. And then once the bark has all been coated this way, I'm just going to use paper towel to wipe on the finish. Here we go here. This is the paper towel. So I'll wipe the finish totally on the piece, saturate it as best I can, and then wipe it right off. Stay tuned for some final pictures, and there will be a link right at the very end to take you back to part 1 where I roughed out the burl. If you haven't seen part 1, have a look at it.